Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 1990's Represent. We're still in our third cycle of 1994, doing a movie. In this episode, we're talking about True Lies. So, another Schwarzenegger double feature, basically. So, last cycle of 1993, we did Last Action Hero, and now we're doing True Lies. So this is actually our second Schwarzenegger double feature on this series. So, very first cycle in 1990, we did Total Recall, and then in the first cycle in 1991, we did Terminator 2, and then follow that up later on with, again, Last Action Hero, and now True Lies. A really fun, basically an action rom-com, essentially. Of course, written and directed by James Cameron. I don't know how I rank this against his other movies. It might actually, even though I love the movie, it might actually be in kind of like my James Cameron, like bottom, uh, near the bottom, just because his other stuff like Aliens and Terminator 2 um, are so good. Maybe I would rank it like, I think Avatar looks great. The story, I don't think in Avatar isn't amazing, but I think it has like a very wide appeal. But True Lies is just really good. It has Schwarzenegger actually having like some good comedic acting, just great cast, great action. Like I said, basically an action rom com, if you will. Have some notes here about this, so we're going to get through those, and then we're going to get to the plot and all that. I rewatched this movie recently and had a really good time watching it. Let's see where we're at here. True Lies. So, first released July 15th, 1994. It's based on a 1991 French film or French comedy called La Totale. Like, I think I'm pronouncing that. My French is not great, but I think it just means the total. So, La Totale. It's based on that. This James Cameron has a visual effects house called Digital Domain. This is their Digital Domain's first major production. So, handling a bunch of like visual effects for the film and things like that. And that company is still around doing like visual effects, which is pretty good. Let's see here. This is also the first film apparently that had a budget of $100 million or more. That's obviously not a huge budget by any stretch of the imagination nowadays, but back in 1994, this was the first movie that had that large of a budget. It grossed $378 million off that $100 million, so did very well at the box office. I didn't see it in theaters. I have seen it in theaters since then, but I didn't see it in theaters in 1995. I think I either rented it on VHS or it was on HBO. I don't. It's been a while well, back in the 90s. I don't remember if stuff would go to HBO first or go to VHS first. I don't really remember. That's definitely like a bygone kind of like era, if you will. But I either remember either renting it or watching it on HBO, maybe even both at some point, because I definitely have rented it before and then also probably saw it on HBO at some point. But again, didn't see it in theaters initially. I did see it, not recently. It was like 5 years ago in theaters. There's a theater around here that did a whole series of, I think it was just like 1 month was all just 90s action classics. So they showed Speed, they showed True Lies. What else did they show that was like in there? I think they were going to show Face Off, but that one for some reason they canceled the screening of that. But just a lot of really good 90s action films. Bad Boys was in that, was part of that series as well. But so the first time I saw this in theaters was actually at that screening. That was like 2019. And it was really nice. It was all on film, so it was kind of grainy, but sometimes film is just great like that. Like you get like the cigarette burns in there as well. So the last time I watched it before this most recent rewatch was in 2019. And again, this most had a blast with that screening. Had a blast with this most recent rewatch as well. Let's see here. Let me bring up the cast because the cast in this movie is really good. Let me just pull up here to where the cast is. So of course we have Arnold Schwarzenegger in this film. Like I said, he kind of gets to play. he obviously gets to play kind of like the action hero, but he also gets to play a normal kind of role as well, because it's basically a double kind of life kind of thing. He's a secret agent, but also a computer salesman. He gets to do a lot of like comedic acting that a lot like most of the times he doesn't really get to do all that often, or at least didn't get to during that time period. Then of course you have Jamie Lee Curtis in there as well. I think the only thing I had seen Jamie Lee Curtis in up to this point was maybe the first Halloween, and I think I think that was the only thing I had seen her in. Tom Arnold is in this. Bill Paxton, Tia Carrere is in this as well, and I think this is the second movie I saw her in, because I first saw her in Wayne's World, and then didn't see Wayne's World 2 right away. So this would have been the second film I saw of her in it. You have Art Malik, Elijah Dushku, Grant Heslov, who I think now is more known for like being a film producer, and then Charlton Heston is in this as well. He's kind of like he plays basically Schwarzenegger and Tom Arnold and Grant Heslov's boss, basically, which is really interesting because he's just got a great like way of speaking. It's like very like over the top. If you've ever seen a Charlton Heston movie, you kind of know what I'm talking about. But the cast is really good. Like Schwarzenegger and Jamie Lee Curtis have really great chemistry. Probably my favorite bits of acting in the movie are probably Tom Arnold and Bill Paxton. They're kind of the comic relief, but Tom Arnold's comedic timing is just perfect in this movie, and Bill Paxton in the scenes he's in, he kind of really steals the show. Obviously, has a long working history with James Cameron, like being like in the first Terminator, being in Aliens, being in this, then following up a few years later with Titanic. So Bill Paxton plays like Simon. He's basically like this guy who's kind of like messing around with Jamie Lee or Schwarzenegger's wife, which is Jamie Lee Curtis. But then he's also like a used car salesman. He kind of, like I said, he kind of steals the show in the scenes that he's in. And then of course Tom Arnold playing Harry Tasker's like sidekick, like co-worker. Tom Arnold's great in this movie as well. We just bring up here. We have a pretty good score by Brad Fiedel. Not quite as iconic as his Terminator score, but a really good score overall. I have the soundtrack CD somewhere because I remember seeing this and picking up, like seeing it on like HBO or VHS, and then picking up the soundtrack. So you get the score, and then there's like a really good cover of a really good cover of "Sunshine of Your Love" by Living Colour on there. Living Colour, a really great band, of course, most well known for Cult of Personality, but yeah, they have a song on the soundtrack. I think there's a scene in the movie where Elijah Deuce's character is like putting headphones on, and that song is playing on like a boombox or like a Walkman, so it kind of plays in the background. But the Brad Fiedel score is very good as well. Like we said, financially successful, did well critically. It has a lot of just your kind of classic like Schwarzenegger action. I don't want to say tropes, but kind of like things like there's a scene where he like kicks like an AK-47 into the air. He does like the pose where he's like shooting it. So you get a lot of the kind of trademark Schwarzenegger kind of stuff you would expect. The action is just really good. It's really interesting because the first chunk of the movie, it's them infiltrating. We'll get to more of this when we get to the plot. They're infiltrating that kind of Swiss like party to get like computer information. And then so there's like a decent like chase scene there and stuff like that. Then it goes back to, I think they're like based in DC or something like that, or that's where most of the stuff takes place. And then of course it goes to, so it's like Switzerland. I think Washington DC is where they're based, and then the Florida Keys for like the kind of final act of the film. But the second act of the film doesn't have a lot of action. That's kind of when you get into more of the kind of Bill Paxton's like story and his kind of connection with Helen Tasker and stuff like that. There is some decent action in the stuff in DC, like when they are chasing down the lead kind of terrorist, and he does a thing where he jumps a motorcycle over the from like the hotel roof to like another building across the street. So there's some decent action there, and then the third act is when the action kind of really ramps up, and you get just like the whole like third act is basically nonstop action essentially. But you have this chunk in the middle of that is kind of a little slower, a little more comedic, but it's a really interesting blend of like the comedy and the action, because the second like act of the film is like mostly like the romantic comedy stuff. Let's see what we got here. We got the yeah, oh yeah, and during that time period, like the two main villains of the movie, um, Tia Carrere's character is not immediately known to be a villain, but then like you see Schwarzenegger interacting with her later on in the film, trying to buy some like antiques or art pieces or something like that. These like she collects like Persian like artifacts basically or statues kind of thing. And then you see that she's actually working with like with this other character that you just see for a second that ends up being the main terrorist. Those two characters, Art Malik's character and Tia Carrere's character, are absent from like the entire like second portion of the film, which I kind of totally forgot that they're kind of showed in like maybe the beginning of the second act, and then they don't get reintroduced until much later in the film. But then that later half of the film, they're just basically on point the entire time. Let's see here. Apparently, they were going to do a sequel, and it obviously never materialized. I think it was supposed to start production sometime after Titanic. So James Cameron then, after this, went out to work on Titanic. Apparently, they had a script. The actors like Schwarzenegger and Jamie Lee Curtis and Tom Arnold had all kind of like signed on or ready to do it. And then I think September 11th happened, and there was a lot of stuff where they just felt uncomfortable doing. There was like apparently like a scene that involved like a plane, nothing terrorist related, but it's basically just kind of stuff that would probably just not maybe go over very well. And then during that time period, Schwarzenegger was doing his um, governor, his being the governor of California, so it got pushed back even further. And then I think somewhat recently, within like the last like few years, Jamie Lee Curtis said something to the effect of like basically after September 11th, there's probably no way we can do a sequel to True Lies. So a sequel never materialized. I don't know how good a sequel would be. It would be interesting to see basically where the film leaves off, because like the whole kind of concept of the movie is you. It would be interesting to see what the actual script was, because a big chunk of the movie is Schwarzenegger leading this double life that Jamie Lee Curtis has no idea about, and then they eventually roll her into that same program as well. Because at the end of the film, you see they're working on like a mission together. So it would have to be something to where like they're like a spy team the entire time or something like that. So it seems like the like kind of like a lot of like the main concept of the first one would have to be completely just written out in the second one, just because at that time Helen kind of already knows that Harry is like this spy or works for the government or whatever. Apparently, something I didn't know before I did my research on this was there was a True Lies TV series came out I guess last year, and it got canceled after one season. Haven't seen it. Don't I don't think it got received particularly well. I don't think it was like hated or anything. But I think it was just people were just kind of mad on it. So like kind of just didn't really go anywhere. It got canceled after one season. So that's kind of the basis of the movie there. We're going to get into our plot. So again, the main kind of concept at play here is Harry Tasker works for a computer company. That's his cover, like selling like computers and stuff like that. But his actual job is he's part of this. I think it's called like the Omega Sector or Omega Direct. Omega Sector. Omega Direct is a Star Trek thing, but the Omega Sector, and it's basically like a very elite like spy agency, basically. It's kind of like I don't know if they say like where it ranks, and there's like the FBI, CIA, and so on. But there's the Omega Sector, which is this basically top secret government organization that stops terrorism and things like that. So that's the basic concept of the film. It opens up with Harry Tasker infiltrating this very lavish, posh kind of party. He basically like has it's very funny because he has like a wetsuit on and has a tuxedo on underneath it, and just peels it off. So it's kind of funny, but peels it off, goes into the party. They hack a computer, and then like remotely Tom Arnold and I think the guy's name is Faisal. I think is the character's name. Let me see. Yeah, Faisal or Faisal. They work together, and they're like in a van offsite downloading the files to this computer. Schwarzenegger is just basically going around the party. He ends up meeting with Tia Carrere's character. They do a tango, and then eventually Schwarzenegger, he leaves because I think the guards are eventually getting suspicious. And the guy's like, "Can I see your invitation?" He pulls like a cigarette case out. He's like, "Here's my invitation." It blows up. A massive chase happens. Of course, Schwarzenegger escapes with Tom Arnold's character. Kind of forget the name. Tom Arnold's character is Albert Gibson, but they call him Gib. So they escape. They head back to the United States, and then cuts to kind of Schwarzenegger's character like going home and like basically telling his wife, he's like, "Oh, the computer convention went really well," and all this stuff like that. And then it's also shown that Elijah Dushku's character, who's played Schwarzenegger's daughter, is stealing money from him, and that's kind of like a very minor point. But they go back to the kind of like CIA or the Omega Sector place, and Charlton has to kind of choose out. He chooses out Faisal specifically because he's kind of like, I don't think Charlton Heston's character is like really a fan of what happened in like the during like the Swiss like operation. And Faisal says something, and then Charlton Heston has this really great line. He's like, "What makes you think the slack that I cut him," referring to Schwarzenegger's character, like somehow translates or like is extended to you. But then they figure out that Juno Skinner, who they met at the party, has all these kind of connections, and so they want to get in with her to maybe figure out what's going on. So Schwarzenegger meets up with her as a kind of like ploy that he's like buying some Persian artifacts for a lobby for like a company that they're like doing some like decorating or stuff like that. But then you see Art Malik briefly, and he walks into Juno Skinner's office, and he's like, "Can I have a word with you?" And he like slaps her. He's like, "This guy," he's like, "this building's under surveillance, and the phones are certainly tapped, and you're hanging out with this Rehnquist," because it's like Harry Rehnquist is like his kind of cover name, because Harry Tasker and Harry Rehnquist. But then they follow. They basically have two like or three, all like it's Art Malik and two like thugs like follow them, and that's when we get into the whole scene where they are chasing him down through this hotel lobby. The main terrorist, I forget what his name was. Art Malik is Aziz. That's like they refer to him as Aziz. But he gets a motorcycle. Schwarzenegger steals like a horse and is chasing a horse. And there's one line where he's like, Tom Arnold's character is trying to give him kind of like direct traffic. He's like, "Hey, like cut across here, go here, do this," and he's like, "All right, we need to make it fast because this horse is getting tired." And he's like, "A horse." But then they get to the top of the building, and Art Malik, Aziz basically drives the motorcycle over the, like, basically jumps it from the roof to the roof. Schwarzenegger like is like the horse. He's like considered doing it with the horse, and like the horse like he eventually just like stops and like almost falls off the building and gets pulled back up. Basically, they were supposed to. It was his birthday, and he was supposed to like go back to his family and have like a birthday dinner, which he basically blows off. So the next day, he goes to Jimmy Lee Curtis's office to try to like smooth things over, so to speak. And that's when Helen's coworker is like, "Hey, Simon's on the phone for you." So she meets up with Simon, who's played by Bill Paxton, like one of Bill Paxton's best roles, I think. It's just like a very slimy, like pathetic character, and I don't understand. Like, I think the thing was that he's a used car salesman, but he is also like a pretend spy, and he like does it to kind of just give women like a little bit of excitement in their lives or something like that. I think that's what his whole thing was. But they follow him down, and Schwarzenegger test drives a Corvette. You see a scene where he like punches Bill Paxton in the face and like breaks his nose, and that was just kind of like because I thought like initially when I first saw the movie, I'm like he just broke this guy's nose, but then it cuts right back to that scene right before he does that. So it's like, okay, this is what Schwarzenegger is just thinking of doing. But they go there, they basically figure out stuff about him. He contacts Helen again, and he's like, "Hey, I want you to go to Paris with me on this mission," and all this stuff. And then they get intercepted by the Omega Sector people. They basically get arrested. They question Helen about like her relationship with Harry Tasker. her relationship with Simon and a bunch of other stuff. And then they kind of like are like, well, she's like, I just want like, it's like two-way glass or whatever it's called, so like she can't see into there that it's Harry and Gib are doing this like interrogation. So Schwarzenegger comes up with the idea of having her. She's like, she wants some excitement. We'll give her some excitement, and they basically give her this fake mission to go to this hotel. This is where we get the kind of iconic Jimmy Lee Curtis like dance in the hotel room thing, wearing like the lingerie or whatever it is. But she does that, and then Schwarzenegger is actually in that room, and he's got like a tape recorder, like playing this like other guy does like these voice lines for it. She does that, and she starts attacking him. Then realizes that it's Harry, and then they actually get rolled on by the villains again. So, like I said earlier in the video, the villains like disappear for a good chunk of the movie. Prior to that, they also interrogate Simon, and Simon like pees himself. He's like, "Hey, what a real spy, pee himself, man." So then they kind of strand him there. But after that, basically the real main villains show back up. They take Helen and Harry hostage, and they're on a plane. They get drugged, and they wake up kind of like in this compound, which is in the Florida Keys. And at this point, it's revealed that they have these I think it's four nuclear warheads, because I think there's like they bury one on the island and detonate it to like as a demonstration, and then I think there's like three more, I think. But basically, they're getting they're going to get interrogated. They inject Schwarzenegger with like a true serum to try to like interrogate him, and he's like, hey, I'm gonna kill this guy. And the guy's like, how do you expect to do that? He's like, I picked my handcuffs. He's like, he throws this thing at the guy, kills the guy. Then this is when the action really just like kicks off. There's huge gunfights at this compound, explosions everywhere. There's a part where he's got like a gas hose, and he's like makes like a makeshift flamethrower out of it. He gives Helen an Uzi at one point, which she fires, and then it just tumbles down the stairs and like kills a bunch of terrorists because it just like lands on the steps and is like firing as it's falling. It's kind of like it's very silly, but it works. It works for the film. Helen thinks Harry gets blown up because you see Art Malik's character Aziz takes a rocket launcher and blows up the fuel truck, but of course Harry dives off the dock and is like swimming, and gets extracted by Gib and like some of the other like helicopter pilots there. Then this is when you get the iconic just scene on the causeway that connects the Florida Keys. So you have this convoy. There's like I think it's like two or three different or vans that have like some of the nuclear weapons on there, and they're chasing them down. And there's a really great scene where you're like, all right, like take out the bridge. So they fire rockets at the bridge, and they're like, all right, these rockets aren't going to set out the nukes. And Schwarzenegger's like, no, like it should be fine. It won't set him off. But then Schwarzenegger does this thing where he looks like kind of like he's like that to Tom Arnold, because it's just like we don't know if this is actually going to blow it up or not. But the bridge gets blown up. One of the trucks goes flying and just kind of skids to a halt. The terrorists in this movie are very cartoonish, so to speak. But there's they just do really silly stuff or dumb stuff too. There's a part where like they're firing a rocket in one of these vans, and there's the guy holding the rocket launcher. There's a guy behind him, closer to the front of the van, and other people toward the back. And the guy's like basically like, no, like don't fire, because the exhaust of the rocket basically like just pushes him through the windshield. It's really weird because like you see this one guy go flying through the windshield, and the terrorist like that's driving the van, it looks like he purposely like swerves to run the dude over, like after he's been knocked out of the window. I'm like, because you see him, he's just like that, and cranks the wheel and just runs the guy over, which is, I have no idea why. Maybe that guy was like upset about something, who knows. But then they like like I said, the bridge gets blown up, and one of the vans comes to a halt. Like, it's teetering on the edge, and like it's kind of like a funny scene where like the terrorists are like, one guy's like doing that to tell the other people to not move, because if they do move, it's going to like unbalance like the thing, because it's basically like just tipped like that. So I think that if the two guys on the back get off, there's enough weight in the front to pull it off or to pull it down. So it's perfectly balanced, and they're all celebrating. They're all like laughing. They're like, "Oh yeah, like we survived, great!" And then you see a pelican land on the kind of like near the dashboard because the windows are broken. It lands on there enough to make it shift weight again and fall off, and then the Pelican just flies away and the thing falls off the bridge and blows up. And then after this, you have Helen and Juno in there in the limo. They're fighting each other. I think Juno's like got like a pistol and she accidentally shoots the driver. So now the limo is out of control. So it's like swerving all over the bridge. They try to, and this is like a really great scene just because like they could have easily just had the helicopter come down, grab Helen, and be done. But they build the suspense in the scene so well. So James Cameron is definitely like a master at doing this. Basically, he's like, Schwarzenegger's like, the bridge is out, the bridge is out. She's like, what? And then she eventually realizes it's out, and she's trying to like reach up and grab his hand because he's hanging off like the whatever the things on the helicopter are called, they're like the little like landing skids or whatever they are. He's hanging on that, trying to reach her. The limo is so out of control, so basically it takes several attempts for him to actually rescue her, and it just builds the suspense very well. So like at one point you see her reaching, she can't grab him because he's not close enough. The helicopter goes back up and has to come back down. He reaches again, he actually grabs her hand, but then like the limo hits something, so like she has to let go of his hand, and then eventually you see her grab, they grab Schwarzenegger's hand, they pull her up. You see Juno basically wake up, like not wake up, yeah, because she got hit by a wine bottle several times, or a champagne bottle, and then she just looks at like the bridge is out. And her like final lines are just like, oh shit, and then like it flies off while they pull Jamie Lee Curtis up. Just an amazing sequence. The nuke goes off, blows up that island, and they're at a minimum safe distance, so they're good. But then later in the film, like right after, they basically say, hey, they're in this office building, but they have a hostage. They have your daughter. So Schwarzenegger steals or commandeers one of the Harrier jump jets. Can't fly it all that well because it's been a while since he's flown one, but eventually flies that over to the building where the terrorists have their bomb, and they're basically doing a video where they're like, he's like, if you don't give us what we want, we're gonna blow up a city like each week or whatever it is. And they're doing that. There's a scene where like the battery is low, and like one guy's filming it. He's just like, no, actually the battery thing is actually earlier in the film, but it's just kind of funny. So this is actually before they get to the bridge, but he's like, the terrorist is like, oh. He pulls the camera down, and Art Malik's character is just like, he's like, what? Like, well, why are you stopping? He's like, battery. He's like, then get another one, you idiot, kind of thing. But they bring a news crew into the building to film them, and he's like, with one turn of this key, I can blow up one of these things. And this guy's like, what key? And then you see that Elijah Dushku's character has taken the key and has run off of it, and then Aziz is chasing her down. But then it's revealed that also one of the people on the news team is Faisal, because basically he's got a gun in like where like the video cassette would go. So he pops it, he pulls it out, drops the camera, he like gets rid of a couple terrorists. And then you have the scene where basically Schwarzenegger shows back up. There's a really great scene where there's a guy looking through binoculars, and the jump jet, basically it's like binocular guy is here, jump jet comes into frame, and you see him adjust the binoculars, and then you just see this really good close-up on Schwarzenegger. You see him drop the binoculars, like pull them down. His expression is just like that, and then Schwarzenegger just starts blasting that whole building with all the terrorists. Aziz eventually jumps onto, or Aziz is chasing down Schwarzenegger's daughter, who has jumped off this crane and onto the plane. Aziz jumps onto the plane as well. There's a huge fight on the plane, and then basically what happens is Schwarzenegger kind of gestures, he's like that. And so what happens then is he tilts the plane like this. Aziz goes flying off the side of it, and I think like his like suspenders or like whatever his like he was wearing gets hooked onto one of the rockets, and you see this helicopter flying by. He just fires a rocket with Aziz on it, flies into the thing, blows up. Whole kind of like disaster averted basically. And then after that, it cuts to a scene a year later where now Helen and Harry are on the same team. They go to this kind of like big kind of party like thing as like part of their mission, and they run back into Simon makes another appearance, and she's like, should I do him here? Or like she pulls out what's revealed to be a lipstick finger lipstick, which looks like she's pulled a pistol out because he's holding it kind of like under where his neck would be. And then Simon pees himself again, and she opens it, turns it on, puts on lipstick, and they do another tango dance. That's basically the plot. But the movie is just a lot of fun. Probably little weird little detail. Probably my second favorite use of the Blue Danube in a movie. Of course, that's the iconic classical music score where it's like da 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 da. So very good use of that song in this film. It's played earlier in the film during the first part where Schwarzenegger's character is infiltrating that chateau or whatever it was. But probably the best use of that song, in my opinion, is probably 2001: A Space Odyssey. But really, like one of my favorite. Like I'm not a huge classical music fan, but I really like that song. But again, second favorite use of that song is in True Lies. But True Lies is still just a lot of fun. It's really weird for me to rank it with some of Cameron's other stuff because a lot of his other stuff is just so iconic, like Aliens. We mentioned this earlier, but like Aliens, Terminator, both the Terminator, and Terminator 2. So I don't know where I would necessarily rank it. I think it's an incredibly competent like action movie. It's probably one of his most grounded movies as far as it being like potentially somewhat realistic. Because like a lot of his other stuff, like his probably only two movies I can think of where they are realistic are probably Titanic and this. Because like Titanic obviously based on historical events, and this is something that you could potentially see being a thing because it doesn't involve like a lot of the sci-fi stuff his other movies are with like sentient AI that is trying to get rid of all the humans in Terminator or aliens on various like moons and planets like in Aliens or the Pandora planet from Avatar and Avatar: The Way of Water. And also the Abyss. The Abyss is very grounded as well until you get to the end because then at that point you see the weird whatever like the water aliens in the Abyss were. So I guess like the Abyss up to a point is somewhat contemporary, but I think the most contemporary ones as far as it being like realistic are like this and Titanic. So it's just very interesting that he can basically go from doing like a huge sci-fi film to doing basically an action rom-com. James Cameron, of course, one of my favorite filmmakers, and always had a fun time watching his films. But True Lies is still a lot of fun. I would highly recommend checking it out if you haven't seen it, or if you've seen it, it might be time for a rewatch as well. I had a blast with my most recent viewing. But that is going to do it for this episode. We'll be back again in a few days doing a video game. So remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We'll see you then. Thanks again for watching. Take care and have a good one. See ya.